Hello, class. Today we are talking about radio dramas. And if you have the textbook, that's Chapter 10, Drama and Dramatic Elements in Radio Production. So, what is a radio play or a radio drama? Well, a radio drama is a story told through audio. Now, this could be something that is fictional, and either way, it will usually include dialogue, sound effects, music, and some kind of narration. Now, of course, depending on the type of story you're telling, this could be something that is closer to a stage play, or it could be something closer to a documentary, as in the case of the docudrama. So, the docudrama is a documentary that is told through audio. It will often include just like a traditional documentary that you watch now on streaming or through TV. You'll have interviews with key members of the whatever it is that you're talking about. And you'll also have some kind of narration, usually. So, narration, that's where you have a narrator who is helping the audience understand what's happening. And that could be someone who is part of the play or who has a particular insight into whatever you're talking about. Or it could be an outside unnamed narrator as well. So, whatever you end up producing, it normally has some combination of dialogue, sound effects, and music. Now, before we get into writing the radio drama, let's look at a brief history of the drama. Now, when we talk about radio entertainment, it actually starts back in the wired days. So, whenever people had telephone networks, when they were just becoming extremely popular. And these wired telephone networks, sometimes people would use them to deliver opera or other entertainment, just like with cable TV during the 90s and 80s. Now, there was even a subscription service in 1893 called Telefon Hiramondo, or a telephone newspaper, and that was launched in Budapest, Hungary. And you would subscribe to this service and you would get news, sports, and entertainment. So sometimes they would have professional musicians or actors on there who would perform for people. And this would happen for 12 hours a day. And you could tune in anytime if you were paying for this service and listen to whatever they had going on. And each element would happen at certain times during the day. So you might have your opera stuff first, and then they might have a little news, and then they might have some sports, and so on and so forth. And then maybe a repeat at a certain point. Now, in the early 1900s, they still had private radio broadcasts. Those were the more normal radio broadcasts, so wireless type of connection. And most people were still like the thinking of radio as that thing that was delivering Morse code or that was connecting ships in the military. Um, but there were a few pioneers who were able to transmit music and voice. One of them was named Reginald Fessenden, and he was a Canadian. And in 1906, he delivered what's considered the first long distance music and voice transmission. So he's the first person we have recorded who did this, and he did that on Christmas. And everyone in his receiving area was able to hear his broadcast. And he did one or two other ones after that, but mostly went on to work for different companies, and filing a few patents that eventually were involved in some lawsuits with different big name groups, including, I believe, Bell's groups. And eventually he was able to retire to I think it was Barbados, I want to say. But anyway, the so early 1900s, mostly private radio. A few a few people were experimenting and like Fessenden were able he was the first one again who was able to do that long distance music and voice transmission. Now, November 2nd, 1920 was the first commercial radio broadcast, and that was put out by KDKA Pittsburgh. Now, nowadays, whenever you listen to radio or you watch TV or something and it's those over-the-air channels, you'll notice that all the stations to the on the eastern side of the Mississippi actually start with a W, and all the ones on the west of the Mississippi start with a K. So the KDKA Pittsburgh is still there, but they usually use a new call letter now, set of call letters now. But anyway, so November 2nd, 1920, first commercial radio broadcast by KDKA Pittsburgh. And that was a broadcast of the 1920 presidential election results. So this was the first live broadcast of presidential election results, and people were so excited they were able to find out who the next president was going to be, and they could complain about it even faster. So after that broadcast, there are a few other ones from KDKA, including a baseball transmission. So they were able to have the first or one of the first color commentaries about a baseball game. And then in 1921, KDKA Pittsburgh aired the sketch A Rural Line on Education. And that was considered the first quote unquote play written for radio. So it was a little like sketch show called A Rural Line on Education, and it led to later broadcasts where people began airing other things. Like in 1922, WJZ in Newark, New Jersey aired Broadway musicals. They started doing that regularly. And over in San Francisco, another station was airing more plays and using multiple actors in them. Later in, so that was kind of in February when WJZ started airing Broadway musicals. And in August 1922, in Schenectady, New York, there were station broadcasts where they were releasing serialized programming. So that was the first time that there was a weekly serialized program where every week at a certain time you would be able to tune in and listen to this professional broadcast with actors, sound effects, and music where they would put on a show. And this, of course, eventually led to the first full radio play in 1924. So in 1924, Richard Hughes, who had written other plays, was asked to write the first full radio play called A Comedy of Danger, and it aired on the BBC. So they broadcast this performance, all the dialogue, the sound effects, everything in it. They were developed specifically to be heard by people and understood just by being heard. So they didn't have to modify Shakespeare or anything like that, which did happen in the 20s and 30s, where they would take older plays and they would find ways to, or and books too, and they would broadcast them for people and help them to visualize what was going on through music and sound effects and modifying the dialogue a bit. Now, after the success of A Comedy of Danger, other shows start popping up on the radio waves. So in the 1920s, in Canada, in Great Britain, and in the US, and in some other areas too, but these are the main ones we're talking about in here. Um, in the 20s, you start having more of these radio specific shows where and radio specific entertainment. So it's developed just for this medium. And that means we have these detective dramas like Dick Tracy and Dragnet. And then you even have children's programming. So if you tuned in at a certain time, then you could hear Little Orphan Annie or you could hear some other children's shows. And that way we start having this serialized entertainment and these things that people like everyone can say, oh, well, yeah, did you tune in last night and listen to blah, blah, blah? Or like you have more and more sports that are being broadcast. So where there you have commentators who are explaining what's going on, that kind of thing. And of course, this is all in addition to news and music entertainment being broadcast. Now, uh, another big day in radio, and of course, this is during the highest popularity time for radio and radio plays. Um, in October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles' adaptation of War of the Worlds airs. And this this program was developed differently from ones in the past. It doesn't have a clear introduction where people can say, oh, yeah, this is the beginning of a show. Instead, he developed it so it would sound very similar to the newscasts that people were already hearing. And because of the way the script is developed, which you'll hear in a second, and the way everything goes together, it made some people think that it was real, that this stuff was really happening. And so this reportedly caused nationwide panic, and including some people arming for war with the aliens who were apparently invading Washington. So uh, we'll listen to a little bit of that in just a minute. But so after this continued popularity, we still have our more traditional shows too, of course, and they often include narration to help the audience figure out what's going on, as well as dialogue developed specifically for people who can't see what's happening on a stage. And of course, TV had very little to no availability to the public at this point. When we start getting into the 50s, it, we start having more TV sets going out. By the 60s and 70s, that's TV's taken over, and people are watching that more than listening to these radio shows. Now, one thing to note though, in 1951, the UK radio soap opera The Archers first aired, and this program actually continues to this day, and they've recorded about 20,000 episodes of it. There's even a link on here to June Spencer. She is one of the original people on the show. Um, she was 101 and still performing for the BBC on this show. So pretty impressive. But yeah, so it is possible for these radio soap operas to maintain their popularity. So whenever we were talking about War of the Worlds, again, that happened. The original broadcast was October 30th, 1938, and it was put on by the Mercury Theater Radio Production Group. And Orson Welles adapted his script from the H.G. Wells novel of the same name. And at that time, War of the Worlds was already a 40-year-old novel. But because of the style he used whenever he put together the radio broadcast, people supposedly didn't really notice a lot, or most people didn't notice that it was a fake newscast. Essentially, what a lot of us use now whenever we're developing those parody news styles. Uh, and if you listen, so they have these little musical interludes, just like you would for a normal radio broadcast. So at that time, there would usually be this group um, airing different musical numbers that were recorded and stuff. And he keeps breaking into the quote unquote regular broadcast in order to deliver updates about the impending war with the aliens. And you'll notice also whenever you listen to it, listen to the narration, listen to the dialogue that's happening. So instead of having a narrator just flat out describe things, he uses a combination of different characters' dialogues. He uses their dialogue to explain what's going on and help fill in the gaps for the listener so they know what to picture whenever they hear different things. There's even a part where one of the characters says, "Oh, that ticking sound you hear is such and such." So listen to the way the dialogue develops, and you'll see that it's slowly building up to the alien invasion.
Of the Spanish, Raymond Raquello leads off with La Comparsita. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York. Now, a tune that never loses favor, the ever-popular Stardust, Raymond Raquello and his orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with a noted astronomer, Professor Pearson, who will give us his views on this event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, New Jersey. We return you until then to the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. We are ready ready now to take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Pearson, famous astronomer. We take you now to Princeton, New Jersey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton. I'm standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through the giant lens. I'll ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arouse during our interview. Besides the ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Pearson may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, he is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
Any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be at the point nearest the Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Pearson?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips.
They...
Although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for these gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Phillips, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from the Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems safe enough. Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has just handed Professor Pearson a message. While he reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Princeton, New Jersey, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Pearson. One moment, please. Professor Pearson has passed me a message which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the Natural History Museum, New York. Quote, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Princeton. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Unquote. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our New York studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of Macmillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home, comes a special bulletin from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we'll have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word picture of the scene as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music.
So you can see a little bit about why people might have been concerned whenever they heard that broadcast. And if you listen to the full thing, of course, you'll be able to hear the slow build to the invasion. As you can see there, they're starting out with that kind of, oh, there were some lights and there was a an explosion near this area, and eventually, they'll go on the scene and I think and find some aliens and stuff. So they yeah, definitely something. Now, modern audio dramas, of course, we know a little more about production tricks and things, and unfortunately, that's part of why when we have such kind of crazy sounding news, it can be a little difficult to get people to believe you. But in general, when we talk about modern audio, we're usually talking about audio on demand. Sometimes there will be broadcasts where they actually will broadcast a docudrama, or uh, I guess some people still broadcast shows too, but most of the ones I've heard and seen are through audio on demand type things like podcasts. So 2005, Apple Podcasts app launches. And by 2006, Tim Cook explains how to create a podcast on GarageBand to the people watching in the, launching of different Apple products. And then suddenly millions of people are producing these podcasts. And some of them go on and some of them die off, and some of them have limited runs. So depends on what's going on and on production quality, of course, and audio listeners. But today, we have the ability, anyone has the ability to create their own podcast, or if they want to record an audio drama and post it online. Now, if you're curious, I did include a link to the Apple Podcast documentary section. So if you look at it, this is one of the documentaries on there called Sold a Story, and it's a documentary series about the millions of children who can't read well. So definitely one way that you can go whenever you're talking about podcasting and also radio dramas. And I do have a link to the BBC thriller section. So these are their different shows and things that are going on, some of which include real things, some of which are made up. So kind of depends on what you're looking for. Like they have a Lovecraft Investigations show on here. That sounds pretty cool. Now, here is a modern example of a more modern drama. It's from 2018. It's called Bubble. And if you listen to it, they have a lot of similar things, similarities to the drama that you just heard. So if you listen for the sound effects. How is it included into the dialogue? How are they explaining what's going on to the audience without just completely explaining it to them? What do you notice about the narrator? How is narration included? And what do they do to bring you into a scene? Is there a particular attitude or style that is very clear from the writing and what's going on? Are there instances where the audience is left to figure out what's happening based on the dialogue that lacks some of the exposition, uh, where maybe you're supposed to put together the sound effects and other things yourself and figure out what's going on? So let's listen to part of this episode.
This is all happening now, but it's happening someplace else. In a public park at the crack of dawn, Morgan Kay is out for her daily run. She's wearing a tattered t-shirt, hideous Dayglow fanny pack, and a look that says, hey, maybe don't try and talk to me while I'm jogging, okay? She pops in earbuds and begins to run across her picturesque urban paradise underneath a beautiful blue sky. Guys with huge lumberjack beards and women dressed like 80s breakdancers all brunch and vape and walk shelter dogs and have too loud conversations like this.
This new cleanse is super bomb. I can eat anything I want to between 1:40 and 1:55 a.m. The rest of the day I just inhale a series of steams.
I'm just so much more present since I deleted Twitter and Facebook from my phone. It's given me more time to just exist, you know?
You guys, documentaries. I cannot get enough freaking documentaries right now. Have you seen the one about food?
Activated charcoal is actually like the best.
Morgan turns a corner and is flanked by another jogger.
Hey, nice fanny pack. Did you know that fanny is actually what British people call the lady privates?
This is Chad, a man who clearly just read a how-to on a pickup artist subreddit titled How to Talk to a Woman Who is Wearing Headphones. Going to wager a guess and say he's also super into Bitcoin, too.
Sorry, can't hear you. I have earbuds in.
Oh, we'll just take them out.
These actually don't come out. It's inconvenient, but the plus side is that I don't have to hear strangers' terrible vagina jokes.
Hey, wait up. I was just thinking it'd be fun to talk while we were jogging.
Before Chad can finish his sentence, a reptilian monster erupts out of nowhere and latches onto his face. It's about the size of a monkey and has long, bat-like wings.
Oh, this'll be fun.
Morgan tears open her fanny pack and produces a dagger made of bone. She shoulder checks the creature off of the jogger, then dodges its teeth, claws, and tail, getting in a shank with her dagger after every dodge. She catches it under the chin and it slumps over, dead.
Hey, I want to say thank you. And, you should really let me take your hot monster-killing butt to brunch, because I know this really great little place that's not a total scene on the weekend.
Sorry, I had a power bar before I left the house. Oh, wait, I knocked you out. Oh, whatever.
She lies on her back and looks at the sky. A billboard reads, "Welcome to Fairhaven." The sky flickers and flashes. It's being projected on a giant screen. Through the defective panel, Morgan can see the dark red sky outside her perfect bubble. The defective screen flashes back on. Blue sky again. Bubble. Episode 1. Hunters. Written by Jordan Morris. Later, in Morgan's bathroom, the creature is strung up over the tub. She's skinning it and letting its orangish blood drip into a bucket. Her roommate, Annie, lazily watches while eating a breakfast burrito. Annie is the kind of person who is used to waking up in piles of things. Laundry, people, whatever.
Thanks for getting this. I didn't think you were going to.
No sweat. I mean, what kind of roommate would I be if I didn't provide you the grease you need to destroy your hangover?
It's doing that thing where the cheese is all in one big deposit. It should be spread out more over the length of the burrito, but that's not your fault.
Yeah, well, I could have mentioned it to them to make sure to distribute the cheese.
Yeah, I guess you could have. Hey, make sure to clean the tub. I might actually need to shower today.
Oh, don't give me that. You've been wearing the same pair of track pants since Tuesday? I mean, they still have the size sticker on the leg.
Yeah, I do. Well, still, I was thinking today might be the day.
Okay, I'll clean the bathroom. You find some of your junkies and pawn this off on them.
Okay, first of all, don't call my customers junkies. They're simple scumbags. Second, this stuff needs to undergo sophisticated processing before it can get those scumbags properly fucked up without killing them.
My apologies to the scumbag community.
And
to you, my brilliant hustle genius of a roommate, the best thing I ever got off Craigslist.
Oh, shucks. I know that death struggles are easier for you than feelings, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Ah, it's still alive! Kill it! I don't have any weapons! Get it with the shower head! Shit. My burrito got some gunk on it.
Don't eat it.
I wasn't going to.
I don't believe you.
All right. Well, we will leave Bubble there for now. If you want to if you want to listen to the rest of it, I do have a link in here to the show, which is on Maximum Fun. It's a service where they have a few different content creators in their organization. Um, Also, it should be embedded in in this slideshow, so you'll be able to listen to it there too. And that's it for now. We're going to move on to creating a radio drama in the second half.